You have to be more concerned with crossing boundaries than you are with retaining revenue.
Allow the time in your schedule where you're going to be creative and the other parts where you have to be more business oriented.
It can always be improved. It's never going to be good enough for you. Hard questions, simple solutions, Tommy, right?
That's it, man. It's all about keeping it simple. Find that simple solution.
All right, so another Q&A session. We got Bernie and Shlomo here. Bernie, why don't you tell the world who you are and what you do?
So I am Bernie DeSantis. I'm the owner of Insignia Training Partners, and I help organizations and subject matter experts to create masterclasses, workshops, and virtual events.
Nice. Where do they find you in the world?
Primarily on LinkedIn, but they can go to my website, insigniatraining.com, to find me as well.
Perfect. Nice. Shlomo, who are you? What do you do?
I'm Shlomo Homnick. I'm a men's style consultant, and I help mid-career professionals and business owners dress for what they've achieved so far and where they're going in the future.
That's cool. Well, I like that. That's a good way of saying that. And then where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn at Shlomo Homnick. You will see the hot pink. You can't miss it.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck spelling that. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, I will put that in the show notes to find both these gentlemen. All right, Tom, who is up first for the question and answer live session?
We've got Shlomo up first.
All right, pal. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so my first question is, we've talked about this before with creativity. So how do you balance creativity with business, like with content and marketing? How do you know when to be more innovative and bold and when to kind of pare back and not use your creativity and be more simple?
All right, Tom, since it's on balance, I want you to kind of start there, and I can certainly dovetail in some other stuff about the flipping back and forth parts.
Yeah, I think, this is, you're asking a balance question, and you know that I am averse to that word balance, and I don't like that word balance whatsoever. It's about harmony, right? So, I think that you have to allow the time, and I hope this is answering the question, allow the time in your schedule where you're going to be creative and the other parts where you have to be more business oriented. I think that you can't pit one against the other. I don't think you can make it even. I don't think it would ever come out even. I think that there is a time for the creative process to take place, and I think there's time for you to work on your business. I think that creative space, like when we talk about attention management, for example, we talk about, 4 different zones of where you're thinking and paying attention, and a lot of times that creativeness comes from either where you visualize things and you daydream a bit, or you're working in flow because that's where your natural area is, right? I think you have to cater to what naturally works well for you first, and then be very conscious about making the time and taking the time to work on the busier work, which may be more business for you. I think you have to find what's the more natural thing for you to lean into first, and then take the other thing and create and carve out the right sections of time to be able to do all of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it answers part of it. I think just to clarify, I'm also talking about, when you get into areas like marketing or putting together your web pages, right? When you get into those sorts of things, obviously in content, in content, you're trying to imbue your personality into it and your story.
Right.
And so there's an element of creativity there, but then there's also, you're always trying to simplify to make things clear to the audience. So it's a little bit more in that. It's like when you're communicating as the business, and to lean more into that creative voice, especially when I do such creative work, versus leaning more into that like simple, like message done.
What are you struggling with currently that's making you ask this question?
I think a lot of different things. I mean, I recently revamped my profile just to try to be a little simpler. And I think I did it in a way that felt creative to me. But I got some feedback that it wasn't like direct in the way that someone wanted. Like I didn't just have clothing everywhere. Like even though all my content is about clothing, and even though it's pretty clear what I'm talking about, but that it's not like in your face, in my banner, like that there's not just like garments and people like all over.
Okay, that's why I'm asking this, because there's a point in every single business where we all have creativity. You don't create a business without creativity. I don't care if you're selling, SaaS, software as a service. I don't care if you're just doing that. There's some creativity that comes along with like maybe how you put your system together or what it actually does. There's always creativity. And what happens is we all get to a point where it's like, I got to go sell the thing now. And it can always be improved. It's never going to be good enough for you. Okay. So I want you to understand it, because for me and my business, for Tom and his business, it's never good enough for us. We're always working on improvement. But there's a point that it says it's good enough, right? It's good enough to go to market, right? And then we can start working on that. The task of like, I can't be creative anymore should never end. But there has to be a point where it's like, is this now relevant to the audience I'm trying to bring it to? When we get in our own ways, sometimes we go past it's relevant and get back into creativity where it makes a lot of sense for us. And the reason why, Shlomo, is we've been on that entire journey, but the client has not. So we understand, well, 3 months ago, we did these things that allowed us to understand this stuff, which brought us here, and it makes sense to us. But then we may put it out in the world and people are like, I don't get it. Like, why aren't you just telling me this thing or doing that thing? And you are like, well, I understand it, but they weren't along that journey with you. Okay. So what I'm telling you is that it has to go to market with some relevance. Okay. And then as it becomes relevant, you will get feedback on why, right? They're gonna be like, oh, that made so much sense because, and then I have something called confined creativity or bound creativity. All right. One of my other logos for one of my other companies is built upon this. And what it means is that when you are put in a box, you are bound by, I can only create inside of this box. You actually become more creative inside of the box than if you were let free outside of it. So imagine if I told you, Shlomo, the only thing Adam Hurd is allowed to wear is blue and brown. Would you have the ability to be more creative with that? Or do you be like, man, I really wish there was orange and purple and teal and... Or would you be like, no, I can be creative inside of orange and brown?
Oh, I mean, I can absolutely be.
Sorry, blue and brown. Sorry.
Blue and brown.
So my point is what you are explaining is what you already do for your clients. And by the way, for any of you who don't know, Shlomo actually gives me style advice. Not all my style is his, so I don't want to put any bad vibes out there for some nonsense I'm wearing. Like right now, he would never allow me to wear this, I'm sure. But when it makes sense, like today's lunch that I had to go to, he helped me along with that, and he's helped me pick out clothes and do this. So I value what Shlomo does. You're really, really good at it too. And I know you know how to have bound creativity, because that's actually what you're doing for your clients. You're saying, hey, here's the stuff that's right for you. Let's stay in that box, but be really creative inside of it. So now when you're going out there and getting that feedback, I wish there were clothes everywhere. You could say, all right, well, let's say we had to put clothes everywhere. Okay, let's say we had to. Not agreeing with you yet, but let's say we had to. Well, how would I be creative about that? Right. And it opens up a whole new door of expression for you that is relevant and then brings the clients on the journey that they said matters to them.
Yeah, that actually just gave me an idea like on the spot, so that's fun.
Great. To sum it up, what it really means is that there's a point that it's good enough to go to the market, and then you can innovate on top of that, but you really can't take left turns and right turns. It's continuing forging forward with that. Does that help you any bit?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, that was just what sparked it, but I think that, yeah, like figuring out, I think some of it's just going to be a little bit of that trial and error also. It's just when you come to an issue, trying to tackle it with one and then seeing if that works.
What it has to be is a point where it's saying like, okay, I'm gonna put this out there now.
Yeah.
Right. And then maybe that garners feedback in order to make the next decision. Mm-hmm. But there has to come a point where it's like, okay, we're gonna put this out there now.
Yeah.
All right, Bernie, you have a question, pal?
I certainly do. So I guess I'll give a little bit of context, and obviously, Adam, you and I have talked about this a little bit. We talked about the concept of surrendering, right, and what I've been doing previously in my business that hasn't necessarily given me the results I'm looking for. And I have found it really difficult, quite frankly, to break a lot of the habits that I've built over the last several years, running my own business and the 15 or so years I spent in corporate America. And I think part of that is a result of having so many things that I'm able to do in my business. So, obviously I've chosen to really dial in on one specific piece as part of 2740, but I still have to dedicate some of my time to doing other stuff within my business. So the question is, aside from, prioritization and time management, which, I kind of use the Eisenhower matrix to, prioritize things, and I definitely block time on my calendar. What are some ways, I guess, I don't know exactly how to ask the question, how can I surrender to the new processes I'm trying to implement?
Yeah, so if I understand the question right, it's that you really want to surrender to this main thing, but you still have obligations with other things. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
All right, good. So how much time in your mind have you allocated to the other things?
It varies from week to week based on need
Let's just say
and the things that come up, but
let's just say next week then.
I would say it's probably 20 to 30% of my overall time in a given week that I have to put outside of producing events and doing workshops and webinars.
So then how much time does that leave for the main thing?
In theory, 70%.
Okay, right. Okay, so see what you just did is you gave me a range of 20 to 30. You were unsure about it, but you were sure about the other thing, which gave you clarity on the previous. So you said 20 to 30, so you weren't sure. Then you said 70, so that meant it was really 30. I did this thing once, a post, where it's saying if you're unsure about making a decision, flip a coin, okay, and then while it's in the air, you're going to, and say it's heads this and tails this, right? And you flip it in the air, and while it's in the air, you're going to hope for one of those outcomes, and that's the outcome you really want that you should make the decision with. Okay, it's a great way to make decisions. Hard to do because the coin flips really quick. And like, I don't even remember what I thought. It's a hard concept. Okay,
Right.
easy concept, hard implementation.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is what you just did there is made your decision by working through that, okay? And you said, all right, it's 20 to 30 that I have for this other stuff. And then you said, it's 70 for the main thing. Okay, so what that would mean is next week, you'd have to say how much time do you have for all of that? And then you would have to allocate 70% to it. Okay, now, something may come up that you need to give more to the other things. And you would have to have a boundary to say, I can't this week, but I can the following week. Okay, now if you don't have a choice in that matter, that's not up to you then. But if you do have a choice, you would be rigid on sticking to those things. And at your current stage, it may need to be a week to week assessment of how much time do I have, and that's totally okay. Because remember, what you are focusing on now through Project 2740 in the community is a tiny sliver of what's possible for Bernie and Insignia partners. This is the catalyst that will allow you to do all the other great things that you have the ability to do. But we're at a stage of it's revenue generation, right? It's like let's get the foundation built. Let's have the revenue generation go because you're shifting, your practice to really and you've taken it over. It's all on your shoulders now. So it's the revenue generation stream gets there, and then we can work on the next stuff. So that main thing will allow you to do all this other beautiful things that you are very good at and you love and you have passion about. So what that means is we have to be very serious about this so we can then move forward. But that is allocating that time to it and saying, I'm surrendering everything else, okay? Meaning everything else outside of that 70% I gave to it. Okay, like I have this 70%, and when I'm doing this, that's all I'm doing. I'm not going to work on new projects. I'm not going to work on the other things. Unfortunately, I can't be with the family. That's what that is.
Right.
And that's setting that boundary to say, okay, this is how I'm prioritizing it. Okay, because there's goals and there's priorities. Your priorities are things that are non-negotiable. I'm doing this no matter what. Okay, but the beautiful thing is you have the ability to set those priorities. You have the ability to set the time frames. You have the ability to set the proportions of those time frames. But you have to be, number one, realistic about it, and number two, very, very serious about it. This is a practice you'll have to go through at the current stage that you're at week to week, it sounds like. I still do this every Sunday. I sit down, I look at my calendar and assess what I'm putting time into. And there's something that for the last 45 days almost, in 2 days it'll be 45 days, I should have put time into that I put 0 into. Actually, a tiny bit, a fraction, maybe 1%. And I only have 47 days left to finalize this thing. It's not a priority for me. It's something that needs to get done, but it's not a priority for me.
Right.
Okay, and I will suffer the consequences because I haven't surrendered to that. Okay, and I'll deal with it. It's okay. It won't be life-changing, but I'm going to have to deal with that. So when it becomes a priority for me, then on Sunday, I'm going to be like, all right, I have to put this much time into those things. So the other cool thing about this, and then I'll pass to Tom, is when you set something and you say you're going to do it and you don't do it, what that tells you is it really wasn't a priority. And 25 years of doing these things, I still do that. I set a priority and I don't follow through. It happens. And then what it tells me and informs me is like, all right, Adam, that really wasn't a priority. I don't need to do this thing. Why am I putting a self-inflicted responsibility on my shoulders? And then I have to assess, all right, let's just let somebody else deal with that, or let's put that on my problems list on the shelf where I'm going to deal with it another time, or let's take this fucking seriously and get it done right now.
Adam made a very good point about what's non-negotiable and what is negotiable. Of those things that you're struggling to surrender, what analysis have you done to really determine what is non-negotiable that remains in that 30%?
That's a good question. No significant real analysis to determine what should stay or go at this point.
Right.
It's as needed. I determine if it's urgent or important or both, and try to knock it out as quick as I can.
Because it may not really need the 30% that you're giving it. It may need a full evaluation to determine what is truly non-negotiable there, right? Because you're seeing that 30% as obligation as well. Am I correct in what you were saying about that?
Definitely.
Like you're obligated to it. So if I'm obligated to it, is it really non-negotiable? Because if it is, then I'm not really obligated to it. And I need to decide where it really stands. If it is non-negotiable, then it needs to stay. And if it's negotiable, then we need to really evaluate when we can get rid of it. And in any habit change, and anything that we do in creating a new habit, we sometimes have to get rid of the current habit in small pieces. And we have to wean ourselves away from that habit. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And how we wean is changing how we think about the thing that we've been doing. And then when we think about it, we change how we feel about it. And that leads to different actions and different consequences. And so how you're thinking about it is part of surrendering. It's just a shift in how we think. Because I think this way right now, and I need to think this way today or tomorrow in order to change that habit.
Makes sense.
So, make sense?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
All right, Tom, we had some questions that came in. So this one comes from Samantha.
Okay.
This is interesting. So it says, how do you address a client who is quite quick to be on your ass about work, but when the role is reversed, they ignore your messages until they actually need something? Ironically, due to work being missed, they didn't respond to me, which is causing delays in their work, being completely and adding pressure on my end to be able to turn it around. So being completed, and adding pressure on my end to turn it around. So the funny thing is, it's a good question.
It is a great question.
But it's people, I understand that, Sam, is that, people are getting on you, right, about not getting things done, and then they're not reciprocating. But here's what you have to understand. They're paying you.
Right.
So you ever hear that old cliche, the customer's always right? Well, it's not true, but you got to take that with a grain of salt, okay? And what that means is when the customer asks for something, you have to give it to them if those are the boundaries that you have set up for yourself. So what happens is when you're working in a client relationship, you have to start that relationship appropriately with saying, here are the expectations I have of you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, so you can get the expectations you have of me. And you have to align those up. Some clients, you'll have to have that documented so they know what it is going forward. Some people, you will have to remind them of those things, and you have to be careful not to cross those boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean you won't, but you have to at least have that understanding. So, for instance, Tom and I have one-on-one clients that we do for half an hour, we do for 1 hour, and we have others we do, whether it's monthly, for 2 to 5 hours, depending on what it is for our board meetings. Now, we were on a call the other night. It was a board meeting. It was a 3-hour-long board meeting. Tom, how long until we ended that board meeting? How much time did we spend on it?
How much time did we spend in it? 3 hours.
3 hours, like on the dot, right?
Yeah, it was on the dot.
Well, what did our client tell us in that meeting when we were getting to the end? Do you
I
remember?
know we have to wrap up.
Yes. He said, I know we have to wrap up and we only have 4 more minutes, so I'll make this quick.
Yep.
We set the boundary of this is for 3 hours. They didn't just willy-nilly go on for another hour. If he would have, I would have probably continued that on. Okay, but the client knew that, and Tom additionally set a boundary of we have to end this tonight at 8 p.m. So this is the thing. It's communication with your clients, and things will get out of alignment. It does happen, especially for someone that is a recurring client, right? You're working with them month after month after month, which I know in your business is. You're going to have to remind people of those things. You're going to have to update the ways that you work. You're going to have to innovate things that work for you and work for them. But it has to always start with, here's the boundaries and expectations. And then as they change, there has to be agreement on terms of how this will work. And sometimes that means your client paying you more money. Okay, so if you're hitting the boundary, okay, and you talk to them and they're like, no, but I don't want that. I want more. You could say, certainly, it costs this. And if they're willing to pay it, then everyone's in agreement. If they're not, you have to say, I understand you're not willing to pay it. So that means we'll stay within the original boundaries. Is that fair? And that may mean them leaving you as a client. Okay? It probably won't, but it may mean that. And you have to be more concerned with crossing boundaries than you are with retaining revenue.
I would just add one thing, because I know how difficult it is in some of these cases. You know, you have to really reevaluate your onboarding process in setting those expectations and make sure that you're covering that in whatever onboarding process you have. If you don't have that conversation, and then you can't set expectations, and then clients become a pain in the arse, as you said, you know, and I'm going to use the British word, the arse there, because, you know, it's one of those things where you've got to really evaluate. It should be causing you to reevaluate, why is this person behaving this way? Did we not cover, or did we not set these expectations when we onboarded them, or even when we sold them? Because you have to create that from the very beginning of the relationship, so the client needs and knows exactly what to expect. And in Sam and Connor's business specifically, they do video editing. They need to have the content at a specific time in order to turn that content back around. And the creative process gets interrupted because somebody gave them their content way too late. And now they become demanding, and it creates additional stress. So be very, very clear, and this is for everybody. Be very, very clear when you tell a client, or you set a deadline for a client, that you'll get something back to them or you'll do something. Be sure it's a deadline that you can maintain. Hold yourself to that expectation as well. Make sure you set the right expectation for yourself as the owner of that business, so that your clients are crystal clear to get what they've been promised.
And now here's the last piece: is you're always able to change.
Yep.
You can always go back to them and say, hey, this is no longer working. And that may mean losing money. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you may be in a situation where you can't lose that money. Well, then you'll have to conform to the way they want to do things until you're in that position. And that's just what you're going to have to deal with in those moments. All right. So we always like to end these asking our two guests, what is your favorite part of Project 2740? So I'll start with you, Shlomo. So for you, what's been your most favorite part?
I really like the weekly accountability meeting. I think that's always good. I like the personal touch also. You know, we have a lot of conversations outside of the group, and you're always ready to reach out and call when when something comes up. And I know that obviously that's a paid service that you offer, and so I appreciate that that sometimes you step outside of that for us, and I know that we all really appreciate that. And also obviously everything that you offer within the bounds of 2740, because it's just, I mean, I worked my butt off for a year on LinkedIn building something, and it really took a positive turn very quickly after I joined.
Awesome, man. You've for lack of better words, you've kind of blossomed into this amazing thing. And it's funny, Tom and I talk about you outside, not to each other, but to other people. No, we really advocate on your behalf. And we're very proud of what you're doing. We really obviously appreciate your services, because both Tom and I retain your services as well. And we do not do, just for anybody listening, there is no swap for service. Actually, Shlomo is a hell of a lot more expensive than we are at Project 2740. So there's no swap for service here, but the price he charges is very valuable. So we're super proud of you, pal.
Absolutely.
And then Bernie, what would you say is your favorite part?
For me, it is the regular weekly, very focused group meetings. Obviously, I produce workshops, webinars, and the likes, and absolutely love what you guys do in there. They're always very engaging, always very informative, and I've never walked away from a session not feeling like I was engaged and learned something that would be valuable in my business.
Thanks, brother. I know you're not super excited with the immediate path in front of you, but you, I believe, understand the necessity of it, right?
I absolutely do. I wouldn't say that I'm not excited about it, because I absolutely love producing events, but I also enjoy all of the other aspects of learning and development too. So I know I'll get back to them, and they're never going to completely go away.
Well, I had that one call with you that one day, and I remembered how tough it was for you, but there was a moment where I almost felt this sigh of relief and this weight off your shoulder. We were talking, so I couldn't see it, but I felt this moment of you surrendered. And you're like, okay, this is just what's in front of me, and I'm going to go after it. And that's for all of us in our lives, as families, as spouses, as fathers, as brothers, sisters, mothers, business owners, all of it. There comes that point when we're like, okay, this is just my responsibility right now. And you surrender, and all that other stuff, it kind of becomes clear, right? It's like the light at the end of the tunnel type thing. And I feel that that's where you're at right now. It's like you're just super focused on it. So great job, and appreciate both of you being here. Tom, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you guys again for being here, and we're going to jump back into the rest of our Q&A session with the members of our community. If you're interested in Project 2740, you could check it out at atomicbusinesscoaching.com/Project 2740. Find out more about our awesome community. We have different levels depending on where you are. We want you to come in so you could be a successful business. And what we say there is that we help you to create your life and your business in 4 months rather than 4 years, 40 decades, whatever it is. So check us out at atomicbusinesscoaching.com, and we'll catch you next time.